Welcome to the Third Win channel, where today we'll be talking about the iCarly reboot. More specifically, reviewing the first episode of the reboot. If you have not seen the episode yet, you should probably pause this video now, as there will be spoilers. The first episode is called I Start Over, continuing the theming of the titles in the original series. And the synopsis reads, Carly Shay navigates the next chapter of her life, moving past a failed relationship and reinventing her web show. Spencer tries to impress Harper with his art. This episode is very much a spotlight episode for Carly Shay, which brings me into the first portion of this review. Let's talk about our characters. Carly Shay. Carly is back from Italy, where she moved to with her dad at the end of the original series, and has been to college since, as well as working on an Italian QVC channel. It is unclear whether she finished college, but she mentions that she took theater and media studies, and concludes that she learned way more about practicing these things in iCarly. And that brings us to now. Her new goal is to restart a channel. It's unclear if that's TikTok or YouTube or Instagram, I don't know. But she's scared to start, or restart the journey alone, more specifically, mentioning that she needs Sam. Her master plan, as we get to see in the opening scene of the series reboot, is to start a channel with a boy she is dating, Beau. She suspects that Beau will invite her to start a channel together on their date, for some reason, so she decides to stream it live to 50,000 people. What can go wrong? Beau ends up breaking up with her, and Carly is devastated. After a month of being sad and crying, Carly, with some pushing from her roommate Harper, decides to attend Spencer's art party, where she meets a boy from earlier in her life, from Camp Lakehorn. She decides it is meant to be, but really, she does not really like him much from the looks of it, especially when they go on their first date, where she walks out on him, rightfully so, by the way. But Carly, however, reveals her intentions for Luke, which is to make Beau jealous, or to show him how well she is doing since the breakup. Upon Beau's next meeting with Carly, he reveals he is seeing someone and they have started a channel together, to which Carly panics at, and she reveals that she's starting her own show with Luke. Since the whole Luke thing didn't really work out, Freddie convinces Carly that she can do the show on her own with some help from her friends, like Freddie and Spencer, and Carly is relieved after her first show, and Spencer toasts to her success with the Baby Spencer skit pulling at least 50,000 viewers. Since this episode revolves around Carly and her trials to get back on track, that also means that I've pretty much just covered the plot of the episode, which I'll get into a little later in more detail, as I think there are some important things that should be mentioned. But next, let's talk briefly about our other characters. Carly and Freddie have stayed friends all these years, as Carly specifically mentions, oof, but Freddie's been busy. He's managed to pursue his dreams, marry for love, and start a startup company, all of which have been revealed to be massive failures, as he has been divorced twice, failed to start his startup, and now lives with his mom. However, the complete failure bit is not entirely true, as he now is in shared custody of his stepdaughter, Millicent, which I want to commend Freddie for. By the end of the episode, Freddie convinces a girl not to date him, nice one, and more importantly, becomes the producer of the new iCarly web show, which he now films with a Pearphone. Spencer Shay. Spencer, since we last heard from him, has become rich, as one of his sculptures, a marshmallow White House, accidentally made him famous and rich. This was, of course, prompted by a spontaneous fire. The thing melted and it was some kind of big statement, so yeah, it became famous. In this first episode, though, we can see that he's trying to reclaim the record for the sculpture with the most moving parts, like we saw in the original series, which is this episode's subplot. But in the end, with Harper's guidance, he decides it's not worth going through with because he wants to retain the integrity of the original, which also, at the end of the episode, catches on fire. Because why not? I mean, very appropriate. Otherwise, Spencer also reprises Baby Spencer in the first iCarly web show, which has been my favorite scene, I think, of the first episode. Harper. We get to meet our first new character in this episode, other than, I guess, Beau, and she is Carly's bestie and roommate. She seems to be successful after what seems like a family tragedy that she mentions. Now we're having worked 4 years at a job she enjoys, and she supports Carly when she is sad about the breakup, and Carly seems to envy her ability to be super attractive. Millicent. As mentioned earlier, Freddie has a stepdaughter, which we meet. She has a channel with 2 subscribers, one of which is Carly, whom she calls old. Otherwise, she seems to be very interested in social media and does not respect her father, Freddie, at all, and is quite obnoxious. We have a few other minor characters like Bo and Luke, but I've already kind of mentioned them in a different part in this episode. Lastly, we have the return of Freddie's mom, Melissa, who bursts out one of her classic mom lines, which scares off a girl Freddie was talking to. It is also shown that Freddie's mom and Millicent might be kind of close. This is yet to be seen. Next, let's talk about the plot. I mentioned the plot earlier, and so this section of the video will mostly focus on my feelings towards the story writing of the episode, as it is the pilot for the series, quite important. Personally, I thought the pilot felt a little rushed, as if this episode had come right after iGoodbye. I had to check if I was watching episode 2 because the way we're introduced back into the show is a little weird. I wanted to see Carly's return, reactions from Freddie and Spencer, etc. The old Nickelodeon directing was more particular about gluing the story in a way that you don't feel left out, and I felt a little left out here. But pardon that rant, because besides this, I thought the humor and the vibe of the show was decent, but you could definitely tell that this was the first episode they shot, as the chemistry is not all the way back yet. The writing in this episode also heavily revolves around aging, even talking about things such as anti-aging cream. But in this video, I don't really want to focus on the grand, overarching ideas of the show, if it is good or not, or if it's successful, but a video on that surely will come after we see all 13 episodes. Now let's talk about other mentions and Easter eggs. This first episode gives the fans a dozen of handfuls of callbacks and Easter eggs to years prior, and I filled an entire 3 pages of notes with them, but I'm not going to bore you with all of that. Let me know if you want me to make a video breaking down all these Easter eggs in a different video though, but I will cover some of the most interesting and important stuff covered. The grand question I had before was, how will they write off Sam and Gibby? And we get the answer to one of the two. Sam has joined a biker gang called the Obliterators, so she is not dead and she is not in prison. Good news, but I don't think we'll ever see Sam come back, unfortunately. Gibby is not mentioned, however, but maybe next episode. We do, however, get a mention of Nora, who purchased a Mariette doll of Freddy from Spencer. Wasn't she in prison? I mean, I can't remember. We also get to enjoy old sculptures and iCarly props such as the robot sculpture, world record sculpture, the Dachshund in the studio, George the Ghost Bra, which Carly mentions she never grew into, haha, the squirrel, the sax, and the crib for baby Spencer. We also get to see the same apartment building, no Lubert yet. The laugh track is back, and the theme song stays the same with a really spicy rendition at the end as like the outro music. Finally, I want to mention that they mentioned Carly's dad and how it was weird that he was in the Air Force but also on submarines. Carly gets a question about her mom, which he refuses to answer, but I think that it might be the first time we ever hear mention of Carly's mom at all, so I think that's important to mention. Lastly, let's talk about some analysis and takeaways. There are a few things that are important to understand from this episode. Why does every other person on the show want a channel? Look who's talking. I know, I understand. I am literally making a channel. But this is important because it seems like it's a social commentary about today's youth needing attention on social media, how they crave it. This will surely be a theme in the reboot. The next point I want to mention is that we kick off the show with Carly and Freddie at low points in their life, meaning that things will probably get better and better from here on for the gang. It will be interesting to see how much their lives change through the next 12 episodes. Following up on that last point, Carly also seems to have some major self-esteem issues, calling herself undateable, relying on others to do things, and being sad over her ex and needing to prove something to her ex. I don't really remember this side of Carly in the original series. Freddy is not without his faults either. He too seems to struggle with self-esteem, more so than the original so far in my opinion. He practically waved off a potential date and he called himself a failure, although he does seem to be confident about his technical abilities, saying that he'll start another startup. Freddy also struggles to be authoritative in his parenting, allowing his stepdaughter to be obnoxious and boss him around, much like his mother. Next up, Harper. She seems to be Carly's rock and doing well for herself, especially mentally. She'll be important for Carly's development. And lastly, is it just me or has Spencer changed from his wealth? He seems a little snobbier. Maybe that's appropriate, but he seems a little less likable for me in this episode. This might be an overarching issue in this episode, having the audience care maybe less for the characters than usual. But that's it for this episode review. Hard to make any conclusions from one episode. I want to watch this one again anyway, but I'm happy it is here. Let me know what you guys thought of this first episode. But anyway, I am off to watch episode 2. See you guys soon with another one of these.